What should I feel? Compassion. Demonstrating compassion, whether it's a hug, whether it's a text of encouragement, whether it's a phone call, whether it's listening when someone explains why they're struggling. Maybe they feel comfortable opening up. Whether it's demonstrating empathy to somebody. Whether it's crying with someone who's grieving because your heart breaks, but just simply because theirs is broken. Should be as natural, I think, as breathing. When Jesus looked at the multitude, what was pointed out to us as a lesson? He was moved by compassion. If I claim to know Jesus, then compassion should be as natural in many ways as breathing. Compassion does not mean you make excuses for wrongdoing, does it? Compassion does not mean that someone overlooks sin. Compassion, did Jesus overlook it? No. Compassion does not mean we condone wrongdoing. So I don't want anyone to misinterpret, not that anybody would, but I don't want anybody to misinterpret what I'm saying. Compassion simply means we care about the individual who's having a hard time. That should be very natural. Compassion means we love the one who's in the midst of a terrible trial, who's struggling, who's having a hard situation in life or going over some bumps. And here's where compassion really demonstrates itself. You don't have to understand the trial to have it. You don't have to have gone through the exact same thing the person's gone through to have compassion. My wife's heart was broken for someone that lived near us because she got to know her a little bit when after moving to this county. And she's a nice person, had some struggles, but Rhonda's heart was broken because you have compassion when the photo was in the paper for a very unfortunate reason. And it just broke Rhonda's heart. Because it's not that the person is a bad person. They have a struggle. Is it easy to be critical of the struggle? Absolutely. Do I condone the struggle? Absolutely not. But there's nothing wrong with your heart being moved. If compassion can move Jesus, then I think we should be pleased if compassion can move us. You know, I want you to think of my job. I'll use mine as an example. If I got mad at every kid every time they didn't understand something, I'm going to be miserable. I went to a training, and this is true. This is legitimate facts. They now have brain scans to prove it. The advancements in technology and the reliance on youth, on using that technology, they now have data to show it's shrinking the hippocampus. Because I've noticed for the past several years of teaching, and I've had conversation with kids before I went to this training. I'm like, guys, and I understand you can't remember everything, but it's like, why would you act like you've never seen it? I make them, recite stuff, call back to me. I say, you repeat. I say, you fill in, because trying to move it to memory. And sometimes you can't help but be discouraged. I'm like, why can't you remember? Well, we learned in the training, guess what hippocampus does? It moves things from short-term memory to long-term memory. And that is shrinking, but not just in children. I'm shrinking, and apparently so is my hippocampus. That's all I needed to know. Great, go to a workshop, find that out. But anyway, I think about if I were to get mad every time they don't understand something, then I'm going to be in trouble. I'd be pretty miserable. It can be discouraging, I'm just being fair, when you feel like you've done everything you know to show them and show them and show them, and you're stretching your brain even as a seasoned teacher to think, what's another way I can even explain it? How else can I approach it? But my frustration will not change a very important fact. And what is that fact? They don't get it. Frustration will not change that. Getting upset, getting aggravated. And not that you can't feel those emotions, they're very normal, and certainly not that I don't feel them, but it's not going to change the fact, fundamentally, they still don't get it. The frustration will only make me miserable. It makes me irritable, it makes me unhappy, and if not careful, I become a fault finder. I'll recognize everything they don't understand very quickly, and I want to point it out. And because I'm frustrated. Frustration can be a very difficult thing to balance. Frustration will not work to the positive, but here's the thing I have to remind myself of at times. If I can hold on to the concept, and I don't think of it in these words, you do when you're doing a lesson about it, so God help me to remember this. If I can hold on to the concept of compassion, then I can find the fortitude to just keep trying. I mean, that's what I owe them. I can just keep trying. I'll put hand movements. You would be shocked It's a simple concept. Diameter, a radius is only half of it. Take half, baby. 0.5. Well, that's 1/2 as a decimal, but that's not half a 7. Or half a 2. And I'll put actions with it. We split it in half with our hand like a karate chop. You know what I mean? You try to do things to help them. But if I can hold on to the concept of that I can have compassion for them, I can find the fortitude, again, to just keep trying. It'd be easier to say this. Why don't you just get it? But I'm going to be honest with you. What does that really accomplish? Nothing. Jesus was firm, was he not? Can you find examples? Turning over some tables is pretty firm when it was necessary. Jesus faced difficult adversaries, would you say? He faced crowds, did he not? Was Jesus strong? Absolutely. Jesus called a hypocrite out for being a what? A hypocrite. But Jesus also was an example of compassion. Can you imagine eating and fellowshipping with the one person that you know who will betray you? But you'll still sit at supper with them because you have compassion. Jesus wept with those who were in mourning. If you wish to look in John 11, 33 through 35. Rondre, you brought me a water, didn't you? In John 11, in verse 33. Well, you're not Rondre, but you'll do. Thank you. In John 11, 33. Ain't going to sit in the wrong chair. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping, which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. He was moved by the mourning of others, and said, Where have ye laid him? They said unto him, Lord, come and see. And these two, I tell this to children at school, and I can get by with it in Ashe County. If I live somewhere else, I'd have to obviously recognize my culture. But I'll tell my children, honey, if you're afraid a boy can't cry, let me free you of that. Jesus wept. And the little kid one time, amen. It was so funny. Amen. Jesus wept. He was touched and moved. There is no shame. It was an outward demonstration of simple compassion. He looked at someone who was suffering loss. I guess when you think about, I think this set of scriptures, wasn't it someone's brother? So it was a sibling. You will weep. God forbid that time ever touch your life. That's hard. And Jesus wept too. Jesus, now remember, was firm. He faced difficult adversaries. His life was not easy. He was strong. He would call someone out for being what they were. But he also showed grace to other individuals that other people would have condemned. There was a time when people would have condemned people, and they brought someone before him, ready for that person to be condemned. But Jesus showed compassion. Would compassion be on the forefront of our minds? If we were in the midst of great suffering ourselves, we'd want it, wouldn't we? But how often is it on the forefront to give it if we are tempted to feel frustrated? Why don't we just get it? In John 8, 3 through 11, and the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. Now, did Jesus agree with the adultery? No. Did he condone anything wrong? No. And when they had set her in the midst, they say unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery. Notice they didn't bring the man. In the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said to them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. Who's the one who could have cast a stone? The one who chose to show compassion. When Jesus had lifted up himself and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are thou thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. But he gave follow-up advice. Go and sin no more. In Luke 23 and 39 through 43, if you wish to look there or listen to it. And one of the malefactors which were hanged railed on him, saying, If thou be Christ, save thyself and us. So there they are, in the midst of what had to have been Jesus' darkest hour, hanging there with thieves. But the other, someone who earned his place upon a cross, Jesus did not. But these other individuals, from what we understand, earned their crucifixion, correct? But the other answering rebuked him, saying, Dost not thou fear God, seeing thou art in the same condemnation? And he said unto Jesus, Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. And Jesus said unto him, Verily. Now here he hangs in his hardest moment of life. Verily I say unto you, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. He showed compassion at a time when he himself probably felt like he needed it, but he chose it for the other. And Jesus showed tenderness to ones that others viewed as outcasts. And this example gets me when I read it. In Mark chapter 1, verses 40 through 41, there are people who, for whatever reason, sometimes society will deem as unworthy of their time, or people that they need to shy away from. And there came at this time, obviously, leprosy, right? And there came a leper to him, beseeching him and kneeling down to him and saying unto him, If thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. And Jesus, moved with what? Compassion, put forth his hand and touched him and saith unto him, I will. Be thou clean. There are people who don't have physical leprosy, but they are treated as if they have it in some other way because of choices people may know they've made, because of a life and an example they may have lived, but they're trying so hard to overcome. And you know what? Rather than saying we recognizing that they can be cleaned, it's easier to view them as a filthy leper. And that's sad, isn't it? In Luke 7, and 12 through 15, now when he came nigh to the gate of the city, behold, there was a dead man carried out, the only son of his mother. And she was a widow, so she lost what she had left, didn't she? And much people of the city was with her. And when the Lord saw her, guess what he had? He had compassion on her and said unto her, Weep not. And he came and touched the bier, and they that bare him stood still and said, Young man, I say unto thee, arise. And he that was dead sat up and began to speak, and he delivered him to his mother. He looked upon a lady. Well, really, is it normal for people to die? That's part of life, isn't it? Is it sometimes that young people die? That's just life, isn't it? But when Jesus looked upon the situation, he saw a mother and he saw a widow. I don't know, it doesn't say it in that way, but those are traits that they pointed out in the scripture, right? So obviously he knew he was looking upon a grieving mother who also suffered the effects of being a widow. And it touches my heart that you think about what Jesus represented, and he had time to have compassion. Do I have time to have compassion? I think about my job as an example. It is easier to find frustration in situations. It is easier to be moved by anger. It is easier to be moved by irritation. And those things will happen in life, I understand. But God help me when I can to be moved by compassion. In Luke chapter 19, short little verse, some verses. If you want to read, I'm not going to read everything, but if you are making note, should you wish to. In Luke 19, 1 through 5, and when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him and said unto him, who was he talking to? Zacchaeus. Make haste and come down, for today I must abide at that house. How many people could Jesus have chosen from to go to their home? He was often thronged, wasn't he, by a multitude? So whose home could he have chosen? Could he have chosen somebody who was viewed with great prestige? Could he have chosen someone who was well respected among the local synagogues at the time? Could he have chosen someone viewed as a great teacher or orator? Well respected. Instead, who did he choose? He chose Zacchaeus. And apparently, Zacchaeus was a tax collector. That would not have been the most well thought of position in society, would it have been? Based on the stigma attached to what little I read about it, what a tax collector was associated with back then. That is the one Jesus chose. And I am so touched by that example. Because you know what? He chose me. And when he did, he chose the least. I can assure you of that. He's a Jesus of compassion. And I'm thankful that he's shown his compassion to me. In Zechariah 7 and 9, thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, execute true judgment, and show what? Mercy and compassions, every man to his brother. When I'm tempted to be frustrated with someone or something, and we all have our different life circumstances, the easy way out, and I'm just being blunt, it's just the easy way out, it's to give in to the frustration. That's the easiest step, just to give in. It takes much more work, much more energy. You talk about prayer, to channel compassion and mercy. It takes a dependence upon Christ. It takes a dependence upon Him. To me, when you face situations, whether it be a challenging circumstance, a challenging individual, a circumstance with an individual, whatever the case is, family, whatever, it is an exercise of faith and humility to ask the Lord for understanding when something or someone just doesn't make sense to us. I have done math for so long. Do you really think I always understand why a kid can't just get one little simple thing? To me, it's viewed as simple. I try to remember they've not done it as much as me, but sometimes you cannot help but wonder, honey, what more can I do? But it's easier to give in to frustration. It's easier to give way to carnal feelings, malice, hatefulness, a spirit of bitterness. But Christ, and this is what I learned in this lesson for Danny, Christ expects better of me. I understand there's times in life that we may have to take a stand and be strong. Did Jesus do that? I've been fair. Jesus could be firm. I understand there's times in life when we must acknowledge enough is enough. Those of you who've parented, I'm sure you've had to acknowledge that statement. Enough is enough. And you've had to take steps. Again, compassion is not enabling someone and making excuses for them. However, compassion does embody the ability to say, and I'm thankful the Lord offers me compassion. Though I may not relate and though I may not understand, I will love my brothers and sisters. I will seek to have compassion towards their hurting. I will pray for guidance as to how I can encourage them. And if need be, I will be available to be a support while they endure their struggle. There were always, I'm sure we have examples in our life of people who've been there for us and who've been consistent. Compassion, I want to repeat, is not a feminine trait. Compassion is not in opposition to masculinity. Jesus proved this. Compassion is a human trait. It is a Christian trait. When I did this lesson, I tried, under God's help and guidance. For me, it was a very emotional experience, as you might can tell, to put these things and thoughts down. God changes lives. And this is going to sound so silly, but I am a continual work in progress of change. I still see areas where I need to grow up or change and improve. Rhonda Ray and I have this little cat who loves to come and sit at the glass door and meow. It's not hurting a thing, but it loves to sit there. We think it's a she, as best as we can. I don't want to do a thorough examination, but we think it's a she, is so cute. She's as cute as she can be. She is so sweet-spirited, but Jake may crack his skull charging into the glass. Big dummy. But sometimes I look at that, now this is we just change as we age, don't we? There are times I look at that little being outside with our big lug sitting all warm on the inside, and it breaks my heart. I can't help it. I find this big old middle-aged man having compassion for a little cat. I almost tear up, which will make Rhonda Ray laugh. I cannot say with honesty that I would have always had this nature in this specific way. I cannot say I would have always been this way. But as I age and as I grow as a Christian, I believe God in His infinite wisdom is trying His best to increase my capacity for compassion. How is your capacity to demonstrate compassion for others? Is your heart touched by the struggles others experience? Or are you too wrapped up in your own issues to take time to notice and care? We all live in the real world, don't we? We all experience things. And that comment is 100% for guess who? Me. if for no one else. I can stand to reflect on my own ability. I could stand good from that, to have compassion for others. Am I more interested? And I think about this. I am personally at a point where I am taking a social media break because one day I've had enough. I was scrolling through and I saw some posts. Facebook is not my moral compass. I like to see the photos of your picnic. I like to see your cake. I like to see your grandchildren. I don't give one flip about your politics. I am not on there, and honey, you ain't for saving nobody. They gonna have a comment for you. And one day, I'm just being me. I had enough. And I said, I don't need this. And I deactivated my account temporarily. And I am taking a break. But I think about things such as social media, and I'm just using this as an example because we just live in the real world. And I'll put this on me first. Am I more interested in looking at social media and finding things to critique about people than I am to think, Lord, please help this individual? It appears he or she may be struggling. God forbid my initial reaction that I want to do is screenshot it and send it to someone else and say, would you just look at this? They must be backslid. You know what? If the person is in a backslidden condition, then what do they need most? They need compassion, my love. They need my prayers. Compassion will ignite a desire in my heart to really pray for someone else. It will ignite a love in my being that helps me empathize with someone who's going through a hard time that I just may not understand. And you know what the beauty of that is? Honey, I don't have to understand it to care. If I can only be touched by infirmities that have touched me purposely and personally, then I'm going to have a very hard time with the concept of compassion. Because you have to care about someone else. I don't have to go through what they've been through to understand. Sometimes people just need to know they matter. And sometimes other things are needed too. I'm not taking away from any of that. I'm just saying, I don't want anyone hearing the words coming out of my mouth to struggle. But will struggles come? Yep. So here's the question for me. How will I be there for someone when their time comes? Because here's what I can reflect on. Hopefully I'll be to them what I would want them to be to me. Brother Mark.
All right. Very good lesson again. Brother Danny always, Lord really helps him, and I appreciate that. I thought a lot about my own self in that one for sure. And without that compassion, we ain't gonna win souls. And you know, I need to put that right on myself in every situation because we all got different places we go after we leave here, you know. Especially through the work week, we've all got a different place to go to for the most part, and different people we see and their struggles. I tell you, people are struggling. A lot of people are struggling. So let's pray that the Lord will help us with that compassion, because that's something we need God's help with. That's really good. We'll take a little bit of a break and then we'll move on to the service shortly.